Howdy of you delicious people, I'm here today to review Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. So there have technically been a number of different variations of Robin Hood at some point. There's been the Russell Crowe Robin Hood movie. There's also the Robin Hood from 2018 that has Jamie Foxx in it. And so really, I chose this movie, I grew up on it, and so I was like, you know what, I want to do something Robin Hood-esque, and so I just decided to watch this film. So this, of course, is the Kevin Costner version of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And really, to me, this movie reminds me of Braveheart, but this movie is to just have a really good cast. We just have Morgan Freeman and Alan Rickman and Kevin Costner and Christian Slater, and the list goes on. But yeah, we just have a movie where I'm like, man, so much casting choices were so good in this film, and that's my real enjoyment that I have with this. But so with that said, this movie is to be like a revenge film, or just kind of Robin of Locksley coming back to a place that has drastically changed. And because Robin of Locksley does not like that change, he is to try to improve it for the better, realizing that some people had taken advantage of the place where Robin of Locksley had grew up in. We have Robin, who is assigned to become an outlaw, who's to steal from the rich to give to the poor, and is to eventually have everybody and their brother just fall in love with Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. And eventually to the point where Robin of Locksley is to win over Maid Marion. And so, yeah, we just have a fun adventure. There's a lot of things that happen in this movie because it's a couple hours long. So, yeah, let's go on and let's kind of rattle off a number of ways that you can possibly see this movie, because eventually you might be interested in going on and watching Kevin Costner's variation of Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. So, with that said, right now, I think currently available, this movie's on Vudu, VUDU, or YouTube. You'd have to rent it either way. But I will say a number of apps in a number of different situations you could possibly see either this movie here for absolutely free, or a number of other Robin Hood films that you can see for absolutely free, unless you want to go on and watch the other Robin Hood movie that's currently available on HBO Max for I don't know however long. So, with that said, you can go into a Google search and search the words C Movies app. That would be the letter C and then Movies app. Hopefully you'll be able to go on and Google search this, be able to find an app you can dare in fact download, and then be able to see Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, as well as a number of other movies for absolutely free. You can go on and see premium access stuff, stuff that is exclusive for only certain apps. You can go ahead and see all that stuff for absolutely free. You can also go onto a Google search and search the word Fox HD Movies. Regardless of my way of which that I'm going to talk about this app, more likely if you go on and hopefully search those words, you may be able to stumble upon this app. So, because eventually you'll find a logo that says Fox HD Movies, but a title that'll say something different. It'll say Play 1080p HD Movies. Hopefully you'll be able to find that app, download it, and be able to watch a number of things for absolutely free. You can go into a Google Play Store and search the words TV Crush. That, of course, is 2 words. So, you can go on and find an app that in fact has the letters HD Movies with a king crown off this sign. be able to download that and go out of your way to say that you can hopefully see a number of Robin Hood movies. Don't think that Robin Hood Prince of Thieves is on there yet, but maybe at some point it might be on there. Anyways, so other than that, yeah, like I think I've kind of teed up this movie. It's kind of straightforward. It goes into like Sherwood Forest. We have a very interesting friar, as well as we have Azim, who of course is to be a like kind of bodyguard character to eventually Robin of Locksley. And so yeah, let me go on and let me just get into spoilers. We'll go into more depth about this film. It's great. Check it out if you conveniently can find a way to say you can see this film. If you're gonna rent it, by all means, like it would make sense. Uh, even if you might have like a copy of this movie somewhere, just kind of collecting dust, maybe bust this one out and be able to go on and rewatch this film and enjoy it. Especially for the theme that is to be consistently trickled throughout this song of the everything I do it for you. That song, of course. Still to this day, there is a number of just music and like song shows and whatever that eventually go into this song at some point. So so it just kind of keeps this movie alive in some ways. Anyways, but let's just go on and let's get into spoilers. Let's double five this bad boy up. It's about that time to just go into spoilers, anyways, because it's time to say it's spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about the time you get to spoil this movie. So, in the early stages of this movie, we go on and we have this to be showcased in Jerusalem. And so we have it to where Robin of Locksley is to be a prisoner, and we also have Azim, who's played by Morgan Freeman, who is also to be kind of hanging out in this same prison. And so we have it at one point where there are guys coming in and grabbing certain men for them stealing food because they're starving or they're desperate or the whatever, and lobbing off their hands. And I'm like, oh my god, like this is just like Star Wars, the Obi-Wan show that I just saw recently where they're like just chopping off people's hands. I'm like, oh my god. So we go on and we have one guy who gets his hand chopped off. And so we have it where Robin is with a friend of his that I guess he had gone on and done some crusades with, and is stuck here being a prisoner. And so Robin is to want to go on and get his hand chopped off first instead of his friend that is to have stolen this bread. And so we have Robin that is to put his hand out as if he's going to get his hand chopped. And in the perfect time, Robin is to grab this guy and pull him off for this guy to get his hand chopped. And then Robin is going on and starting to beat up some of these guards. And then eventually these guys are coming from some sewer to get the heck out of there. And we have it to where Robin's friend that is going along with him is to get shot with this arrow, and he's going to die soon. And so Robin is there with his friend's death looming, and so his friend is telling Robin, or Robin's friend is telling him to take this ring to Maid Marion and just kind of like tell her that like he's sorry and that he loves her and all this jazz. So we go on and we have Robin, we have Azim who are to run off to eventually grab some big massive fruit, and we have Azim who's asking Robin, it's like, well, hey, like, why did you go on and free me from that prison? And Robin is like, well, hey, like, whatever kind of, like, however a man is to look, like no one should be like imprisoned like that. And so it's like, okay, so that's nice. It's like either way, like he wasn't looking at a person's skin tone before he freed somebody. He was just looking at like, hey, this guy looks like he's going through some like horrible things, and so I'm going to try to free him. And eventually he's going to have a life debt. Because Azim is telling Robin, it's like, well, hey, I'm going to follow you wherever, and like I'm going to protect you because like you saved my life, so I'm going to do that in return. So we have it where like now let's go on and do this other story. So we have Lord Loxley that is at his castle eventually to be told by his men that something horribly awry is going wrong. And so Lord Loxley is to make his way out of this castle to find that there's a number of men within these kind of white cloaks that are around his castle. And so come to find out, we have Sheriff of Nottingham betraying Lord uh, uh, Loxley, and we have Lord Loxley who ends up getting killed. So, and of course, Lord Loxley is Robin of Loxley's father. So, Robin Hood's father is to be killed, and by the time that Robin Hood makes his way back to make his way home, he finds out that his home is not the way of which that he last left it. There's a little bit more corpses in there. There's a castle that is much more disheveled than when he left. So Robin of Loxley is to go onto this boat to make his way back home, and so Robin is to go on and kiss the land of which that is to be his home. And so Azim is going on and telling Robin that he's going to stick with him, and Robin is like, well, like here's the thing, like I want you to go back home. Like if you have a home, like you should go back to it. And Azim is like, no, like I have a life debt to you. And even when there's a number of guys that are wanting to beat up Azim to get him back home, like Azim beats up all these guys and is like, okay, like so where are we going next, Robin? So it's like Robin's like, okay, like I'll accept this now. So we have both of them just walking along, and so we have eventually like Robin asking Azim like what does his name mean with from his people, and Azim is to say that his name means great one. And so Robin is like, great one, that's nice. And so he's like, well, Azim, great one, I'm home. So Robin's just excited to just like make his way home, but while he's to get there, we go on and have this little kid who's running from this guy of Gisborne, and so as I say that as if I can pronounce it better, like even though I'm going to pronounce it the exact same way. So the guy of Gisborne is to be the cousin of Sheriff of Nottingham, and so the guy of Gisborne is to have a number of knights that are chasing after this kid called Wolf. And so this kid ends up kind of shimmying up this tree. And so we have the guy of Gisborne and 5 other guys going on and trying to get to this kid. And so Robin goes on and he's wanting to defend this kid. Cause it's like, I'm sorry, like, isn't like it weird that 6 guys are gonna beat up and try to like kill one kid? Like, isn't this a little goofy? But so the guy of Gisborne is to kind of get a little get a little ticked off that this guy is getting involved in what they're doing here. So we go on and then have Robin, who is to decide to help this kid and let him get away free. And so here's the thing, we have Azim who wants to go on and pray, and he's going to pray, and I think he's looking at the east, and he's going on and praying. And so while Robin is desperately trying to beat up all these guys, he's consistently calling after Azim. It's like, hey Azim, are you gonna help me out? And Azim is no, he's praying. Like, give him a break. So Robin is to take all these guys and eventually leave uh, Gibson alive, or Gisborne alive, the guy of Gisborne, so that way he can go on and send a message to Sheriff of Nottingham that that this is technically Robin of Locksley's land, and he'll determine what happens to little kids who steal bread or anything like that. So the guy of Gisborne is to run off, who's the cousin of Sheriff of Nottingham. So we then go on and have it where we eventually have it where the Sheriff of Nottingham is to want to know how things are going, because he always has this witch-like character who is to be called Morena, and so the Sheriff of Nottingham is to want to see if there is anything in the cards that is to be bad going on right now, as well as the guy of Gisborne is to make his way to tell Sheriff of Nottingham what is to all go on. So, come to find out, the Sheriff of Nottingham is to see that Mortiana is to immediately be living in fear because of a painted man that has haunted her dreams, and she now is to see this character more prominently because it seems like this is going to happen sometime soon, that the painted man is going to come after her and kill her. So she would thought to bring this to Sheriff of Nottingham, but really it also just everything that she's seeing within this this cracked egg of blood and these kind of domino pieces, that things aren't going to go all that well. So we then have it where Robin is to finally make his way back to his home, and it seems that he ends up finding his father hanging in some cage up somewhere, and so Robin is to turn back in just utter grief of his father being dead, and the only one that is actually left alive is a guy named Duncan, who is now blind, and so Robin is to ask Duncan about what had all happened, and Duncan had lost his eyes, forced to go through and be tortured and all this madness. But anyways, so Robin is to go on and take this medallion or this amulet, and then is to go on and bury his father, and is to make a blood oath that he will go on and avenge his father. So now we end up going on and having, of course, Robin wanting to go and meet up with Maid Marian so that way he can go on and give her that ring. And so here's where this movie gets really fun. So we have Robin who makes his way to where Maid Marian is, and he's to go and meet with her. And so when he does, Maid Marian is actually to be in the shadows. He can't see her. And then all of a sudden, like, he's just kind of listening to her talk. But then when Robin is to actually see who this Maid Marian is, he's like, well, like, the years have not been kind to you. But come to find out, this is actually Maid Marian's assistant. But then all of a sudden, like, Maid Marian is kind of hiding in the shadows with this sword to Robin. But Robin overpowers this masked individual, having her burn her hand, finding out that this is actually legitimately Maid Marian in this knight's armor of sorts. And so then Robin is to give the real Maid Marian this ring and is to tell her, like, hey, like your relative ended up like dying in my arms. And Maid Marian's like, wait a minute, like, how is it that any of this happened? How can I really trust you that you're really telling me the truth about any of this? But like, Maid Marian can believe this guy. She can believe that Robin of Locksley is telling her the truth because they were to have known one another in the past. So Maid Marian accepts this and is to mourn over her relative's loss. And so we go on and we have the Guy of Gisborne who is to make his way to Maid Marian's location. And so now we have Maid Marian who's to tell both Azim and Robin Hood to run off with these horses. And so both Azim and Robin are to run off, realizing that they're now much more outnumbered. And so they decide to go on and run to Sherwood Forest. And Duncan is telling Robin that that forest is very, like, haunted and whatever. And Robin is going on and like, well, like, I guess we just have to go on and deal with the ghosts and hopefully we'll survive that way instead of, like, dying. Like, they're trying to hold off their deaths. And so, like, if it's to go on and either, like die right here against the Guy of Gisborne and his people, or to die later in the woods with these ghosts, then they'll have to take that chance. So we have both Robin and we have both Azim and Duncan, I guess, because that guy counts. Like, they eventually make it into Sherwood Forest, and instead of going on and meeting a number of ghosts, they go on and meet a number of men who are to all want a certain tax for these guys passing through this Sherwood Forest, which then has, of course, Will shouting out to these men, and in this very joking, like, fashion, about a rich man who eventually was to, like, fall and trip and whatever. So we have John Little that is to make his way to Robin and Azim wanting this tax for passing through this forest. And so John is to want to take this necklace that is to be very very sentimental to Robin. And so Robin's like, no, I'm not gonna let you take this necklace. And so really what ends up happening is both of them are to just kind of fight over it. So we get to where it seems that John Little is really just knocking the crap out of Robin consistently, But then we get to a point where, like, also we had Robin, who is to see that Wolf's father is actually John Little, and so we have it to where Robin is saying to Wolf, it's like, that's your dad? And he's like, yeah, that's my dad. So it's like, fuck. So Robin is to go on and eventually just kind of outsmart John Little, really just by smacking him in the nuts with this stick. So he smacks him in the nuts, and then we have it to where, like, John Little is like in the water and he can't swim, and so we have Robin that's consistently dunking John Little into the water and saying, like, yeah, I think I'm gonna call you Little John and all this stuff. So Robin is dunking Little John into the water, and so Little John ends up yielding against Robin, and then so Robin is to tell Little John, it's like, well, hey, like, now that you've yielded, how about you just go on and just stand up and you'll be fine. So Little John goes on and just stands up in the water. He's like, oh crap. Like, I really could have just stood up and been fine. So we go on and have these guys who are kind of welcoming both Robin Hood and Azim into the fold of their force. We have guys like Bull, who are to mention how, like, big, massive of a stick that he has, so to speak. He has a stick bigger than, I guess, than everyone else. So we go on. We have them just kind of chatting about what has kind of gone on, and how, like, the sheriff of Nottingham has really, like, ridiculously taxed everybody, and is to go on and say that, like, everybody has a bounty in here, and, like, that everything is just so ridiculous, and that eventually someone should kind of, like, step up against these guys. So we go on into this story, and we have Sheriff of Nottingham making his way to church because it's a Sunday. And so we have it to where Sheriff of Nottingham is to just kind of be burdened for the fact that he has to go and do specific things for the people. And he's like, man, do I really have to go on do these things on a Sunday? And, like, what difference does it really make? And so Sheriff of Nottingham is to go on to church, and we eventually have a crooked bishop. That when eventually we have also Robin of Locksley, who is to go on and make it to this church also to re-meet up again with Maid Marion, as he's, like, saying that he's some blind man and he can't see Maid Marion's beauty, and Maid Marion is going on and saying, like, really, like, what are you doing here? And so all these characters are all at this church at the same time, and so now we have it, of course, uh where Robin is going to bow to Maid Marian, and so Robin goes on to talk with the bishop to ask him about the last days with Lord Lockley. And so we have the bishop that is to go on and mention that there were some dark days with Lord Lockley, mentioning how Lord Lockley was to mention about, like, some dark one, and that Lockley had wanted to go on into this, like, confession with this bishop, and we have it to where Robin is hearing this out and he can't believe it. He's like, no, like, I think you're lying to me. So, Lockley is to try to leave the room with the bishop as we have to where Sheriff of Nottingham is to go into this room also and realize that Robin Hood is inside there. And so we have it to where Robin Hood is to go on and try to eventually get out of this building and is to scamper off. And we, of course, have Sheriff of Nottingham going on and saying, like, I'm going to, like, rip your heart out with a spoon. And so we have Guy of Gisborne, of course, Sheriff of Nottingham's cousin, mentioning it's like, well, like, why with the spoon? And the Sheriff of Nottingham is like, because it'll hurt more. Like, that's the obvious thing. So we go on and we have Robin, who is to eventually, like, scramble away here. And so then we go on and we have Robin, who is starting to steal from the rich to give the poor. And so we go on and have, like, Sheriff of Lockley that is starting to burn down towns and is trying to eventually make people desperately want to find Robin of Locksley to eventually arrest him and kind of have this thing finally all get resolved. So we go on to this story and we have it where the Sheriff of Nottingham is getting so upset with his cousin that eventually he goes on and stabs into his cousin and kills him, and then eventually is to tell, like, the blacksmiths that are putting together these blades that it's a good blade, and then he walks off. So we are to then go on and have Robin, who is going and finding these people with these chariots, and he's eventually stealing from beautiful women, and the bounty is to consistently go up and up on Robin Hood, to at first being like a whole like 100 gold pieces, then it ends up being 500 gold pieces, then it ends up being like, I think, 2,500 gold pieces. And so we go on and have it at one point where we have Sheriff of Nottingham's assistant telling the Sheriff of Nottingham that, like, no matter what he'll do, eventually he's never going to go on and get anybody to want to bring in Robin Hood because everyone is starting to love him. So we go on, and so eventually Robin Hood keeps stealing from all these rich people to give to the poor, to the point of one of the Sherwood Forest people are, like, kind of chucking this gold out to a number of people in need, and so they are to, like, praise Robin Hood and this and that. So we also had, like, one thing that the Guy of Gisborne was to be involved in before he ends up getting killed. So I'll cover that, and then eventually he dies after that. So we go on, and we have the Guy of Gisborne with this friar, who is to have all these barrels of alcohol. So the Guy of Gisborne is to make his way seemingly by Sherwood Forest, and so we go on. We have Robin Hood and his men try and take out the guy of Gisborne with the friar with all those barrels of alcohol. So what happens is that they go and they take the barrels, and the friar is eventually trying to fight Robin Hood to not want to give up any of these barrels of alcohol, to the point where the friar is biting Robin Hood's leg, and eventually Robin is to knock out this friar. But then Robin Hood is to convince this friar to kind of work with them and like kind of spread the good word to all these people in need. And so the friar is like, okay, all right, like, you've convinced me. So the friar goes along and is to eventually be like a really crucial part of of eventually like helping these people go on and defeat Sheriff of Nottingham. So now we transition on. So it seems that we have Maid Marion that is to want to seek out Robin of Locksley because she is to be in fear that she is gonna have to eventually go on and marry Sheriff of Nottingham. And so we have, of course, where also Maid Marian is to want to send a message out to King Richard, and Maid Marian is to send her assistant out to go on and try to send this message. And eventually this assistant of hers ends up getting knocked out. And so Maid Marian is to go on to make her way to Sherwood Forest to be able to talk to Robin Hood. And so it seems that two of these men that are kind of being these lookouts are to supposedly have blinded both Maid Marian and her assistant, and brought them to Sherwood Forest so that way Maid Marian can ask like what Robin Hood is doing, and Robin Hood is just to have a huge room filled of gold. And we have Robin who's wanting to take all of this gold and give it out to the poor. And so Maid Marian is to give Robin this dagger to say like, here, take this, because technically this was a dagger from Sheriff of Nottingham that Maid Marian was to receive as a gift, so she's regifting it to Robin. So Robin is to want to give this gift back to her, but instead he ends up keeping it. So we also have a moment here where Little John's wife is, who I think is actually Fanning, or Franny? Franny. We have Franny who is giving birth to a child while this is all kind of going on here. So we have this party, and eventually this girl is getting into labor, and come to find out the baby is not like set right. And so now we have Azim who is to have experienced pregnancies from like cattle or animals and stuff before. And so he knows how to go on and be able to do a C-section to help this birth. Well, the friar is going on and calling Azim's character a savage, and that like, hey, don't trust what he's doing. And so come to find out, Azim saves this baby, and then the friar is like, you know what, I take back everything that I said about you, let's go on and let's drink. And Azim is like, well, I can't drink because of my religion. And the friar is like, well, like, how about, like, you talk, I'll drink, we'll have fun. Like, oh, okay, great. So they kind of make amends between that. So we we go on, and everybody's like happy, they're having a party, everything's working out. So we then go on and have, of course, where uh Robin is to take Maid Marian to this boat, so that way Maid Marian won't go on and see where it is that this forest is. And so Maid Marian is to go on and like say her goodbyes to Robin, is to leave on this boat. And so now we have it, of course, where Sheriff of Nottingham is to go on and eventually talk to his witch yet again, to try to eventually figure out what possibly is to be the next steps for him to eventually make at this point. So we go on and have the Sheriff of Nottingham talking to Mortania. And so Mortania is to kind of look in her scribbles and her spit and her whatever. And so she is mentioning for Sheriff of Nottingham to be tied to these kind of mercenaries, and that eventually, like, Sheriff of Nottingham should get married to someone. And then Sheriff Nottingham is like, well, who? And the obvious person is to actually be Maid Marian. So we then go on and have the Sheriff of Nottingham going and paying all these guys off and bribing all of them. And they're like, well, hey, wait a minute. Like, I thought you told us that there'd be like a huge amount of gold that we'd be getting. And Sheriff of Nottingham is like, well, yeah, about that. It's like, well, I had to go on and pay a bunch of these mercenaries off, and so that's the reason why, like, you guys aren't getting like a huge amount of gold. So we eventually transition here, and so now we have a bunch of like the Sherwood Forest that is to be alerted that these mercenaries are making their way to this forest. And so now there's a real war here, because we had like Franny and a bunch of people kind of being pushed out of their town to be forced to go into Sherwood Forest to hide out. And so now we not only have like just at first a bunch of men in this forest, but then we have like a bunch of like, we have elderly, we have kids, we have like women, we have all kinds of people that now have to be protected within this forest. But now there's mercenaries making their way to try to wipe all these people out and burn down all of their forests, as well as with Sheriff of Nottingham going on and just kind of like trying to take these guys out and try to like force them out of their forest to try to kill them off. So we go on and we have a number of prisoners that are getting taken via this raid, as well as it seems there is a possibility that Robin Hood is to get killed here, we are to naturally assume. Because we have a moment where everybody is to try to like scramble, because they went on and they decided to hide like way up high, with either within trees or to eventually just kind of be in these tree houses. And all of a sudden we start to have these arrows that are having tips of flame on them. And so all of a sudden, all these places that all these people are at are starting to burn down. And so now Robin Hood is to try and get to, of course, uh, Franny here. And so we go on and have him rope his way to Franny, and then Franny ropes her way to John Little, or Little John. And so by the time that Robin is trying to rope his way back to where Little John is, the rope breaks and he falls supposedly to his death. And we have it to where Sheriff of Nottingham is to go on and take Wolf and is to go and take Will, Scarlet as prisoners. And we go on and we have Sheriff of Nottingham that is going and seeing these people being imprisoned, and eventually he's asking them, it's like, well, do you want death or do you want pain? And one person is to go on and say, like, well, I want death. And he's like, well, torture him. And like, what do you want, sir? Do you want pain or do you want death? And he's like, well, I want pain. And he's like, well, torture him. It's like, see, everything will eventually just resolve itself if you just torture everybody. So we go on and have Will that is to tell Sheriff of Nottingham that he'll go back to find if Robin Hood is dead or not, and he will figure out some way to bring Robin Hood and serve him up to Sheriff of Nottingham if he'll only let him go free. And so we of course have the Sheriff of Nottingham just going on and like, well, like, we'll give him up, but like, let's whip him a couple of times to make it look like we like kind of put an effort into this guy. So Will ends up getting sent back to the Sherwood Forest, and so we go on and have Will coming back, and so we have a number of people that are thinking like, oh, like he must have just kind of like turncoated and whatever, and now he's just kind of coming back here unscathed, and come to find out like he does have a number of scars. So we have it where Will is telling these guys the truth, and so Robin is to ask Will, it's like, well, hey, like, why do you hate me so much? Like, there's obviously something between us that you just don't like me, and I want to figure out why that is right now. So, come to find out, Will is actually Robin's brother, and it seems that Lord Locksley was to have like another woman besides Robin's mother, and so we have it at some point that Lord Locksley was to go on and love Robin much more so than Will, and so like that's the whole the whole hate between both of them that Robin isn't even aware of, because Will is to tell Robin, it's like, well, our father loved you more than me, and so like that's the reason why I hate you so much. That's the only reason that I have all reason to hate you besides anyone else here. And then Robin is like, wait a minute, like I have a brother? Like I no wait, I seriously have a brother. And so Will is asking Robin, it's like, well, hey, like, are you going to finish what you started here? Like, I will go along with you if you finish what you started, but, like, you got to promise me right now that's what you're going to do. And Robin's like, yeah, like, I'll do this. Like, let's go on and let's finish this up. Let's take everybody out. So we then, of course, have it where Sheriff of Nottingham is to make his way into talking to his assistant that is asking him about his bride. And I believe we had of it at this point that Sheriff of Nottingham is to tell Maid Marion that he's going to get married to her soon, and that like she's kind of held captive in this castle. There's nothing she can do. She's to just kind of wait for the number of days for her to get married. So we have it to where Sheriff of Nottingham is to realize that there's some hole in this wall, as if somebody has gone on and been like peeking to just kind of see things. And so the Sheriff of Nottingham is to be very upset, and so he goes to Mortania and is to ask her, it's like, well, hey, like, is all of what you've been doing, is it all been like a fake or been a ruse or whatever, like just to kind of keep you here, to kind of just like keep you keep you fed and dranked and whatever, or to keep food on your table, so to speak. So we have Mauritania that is to tell Sheriff of Nottingham this secret that she was to go on and have a child who eventually turned out to be Sheriff of Nottingham. Basically, Mauritania is to mention that the person that she's looking at right now and talking to is actually her son. And so the Sheriff of Nottingham is like, oh my god. So, like, whatever Mauritania was to do here was to not only keep her alive, but to keep her in the presence of her son. So we now have to go on and change gears here. So we have Robin, who is telling everybody where exactly they're going to go in this big battle against them and Sheriff of Nottingham. So we have Franny, who is wanting to go on and be a part of this battle. It's like, hey, where do you need me to go? And Robin is to go on and say, it's like, well, hey, like, she has every right, as well as we do, to like be part of this, because Wolf is going to get hung soon, and so she wants to go and protect one of her children. And John Little is saying, like, well, hey, like, you have like 7 other kids, why don't you just take care of those, and I'll worry about the 8th one, which is Wolf. So, but like, Robin is to tell where, of course, Franny is going to be like positioned. So they're going into this castle, and we have these men, these knights, who are collecting every single one of these weapons from everybody. Like, no blades, no bows. Like, leave your weapons here. So we have the friar coming in with this horse and buggy, with a number of alcohol, and is to also bring with him, of course, Azim. So they let them pass through, and so I was thinking that this is some kind of like Trojan horse situation where like everybody's just kind of hiding in this one thing, but like, come to find out, the barrels are just filled with alcohol, and they're going to use the barrels as an explosion to try to get down these people being hung, to save them. But eventually, not all is to work out the way it should be. So eventually, a bunch of the married men, so to speak, eventually start to slip past into this castle. We, of course, have it where Robin is to eventually kind of put some crap, just kind of brush it across his clothes. And when someone is to ask, like, hey, like, do I know you? We have it to where Robin is to like pretend that he is like either blind or very ill. And so this night is going on. I'm like, man, you smell, like, get away from me. So we go on, and all these people are kind of like eventually figuring out a way to kind of slip in here. And so we have Franning who delivers this rope to John, or Little John. And so John is to get the weapons in there via this rope, and then is to be able to kind of scale through this rope to get into the castle. So we eventually have it where we have a number of these people that are all getting hung, and so we of course have Sheriff of Nottingham and Maid Marion. They're kind of watching as these people are to get hung, and so we have where Maid Marion is wearing the amulet that Robin was wearing before from his father, and so we have it to where Sheriff of Nottingham is telling Maid Marion, it's like, isn't that a little like, isn't that a little like kind of in bad taste that you're wearing that amulet? And Maid Marian is like, well, like that would equal to the bad taste of you going on and like murdering a bunch of people right in front of my eyes before we get married. So we go on and we have, of course, Wolf, who is to be within a number of people that are all getting hung. They're, of course, going on and making their way to eventually get hung. And all of a sudden, we have it where Will is kind of like in the background trying to look at Wolf. And so we go on and have Wolf who starts beating up Will, and Sheriff of Nottingham wants to know what's going on, and so they end up grabbing Will and presenting him to the Sheriff of Nottingham. It's like, oh, hey, yeah, the turncoat. Hey, like, whatever happened to Robin Hood? And Will's making up some story of all he ended up finding was a grave of Robin Hood, supposedly. And Sheriff of Nottingham doesn't really accept that answer, so he's like, well, how about you just go on and get hung like all the other people are? So Will is to get forced to be hung, and so we go on and have everybody like getting noosed up, and then Will is to come and have us find out that there is no more room for anybody to get hung. And so this guy goes on and just latches Will to this barrel, and that of course is the one barrel that they wanted to go on and shoot this arrow off of to explode this whole hanging mechanism. So we have Azim who's getting ready for this arrow with this flame on it, but they have to go on to a different plan because that isn't going to work. So we have it to where Wolf is starting to get hung, and John Little is running to his son like you better not hang my son. I'm gonna get him. So we have it to where all of a sudden Robin Hood is to get into action, and he is to perfectly line up this bow, an arrow, to eventually knock down Wolf, as like he has to take 2 shots, and then the rope ends up breaking. So now they immediately figure out that Robin Hood is here and all of the other married men are all here. So we have at one point where Maid Marian is screaming for Robin, and Robin Hood, of course, because she's like, hey, like protect me, because frickin' like I'm gonna be forcibly married by Sheriff of Nottingham, and he's also gonna have to want to quickly also bed me, because we have Mortania that is going on and saying that that Maid Marian is ripe and that she'll give Sheriff of Nottingham a son. So we go on and like we have a bunch of Robin Hood trying to take down a bunch of these knights. We go on and have everybody just trying to pitch in and get their fight in. We have at one point where a bunch of people are all trying to leave, and Azim is trying to bring them all back by saying like, "Hey, you fight for Robin Hood, you fight for your freedom, and like fight alongside Robin Hood." And they're like, "Well, wait a minute, wait, like let's go on, yeah, let's fight." Because they're all gonna leave, and they decide no, let's finish up this fight. So there are also some times in this movie where I feel that they weirdly like edit this film odd. There are certain parts in this film where we have Azim obviously like they do this weird kind of like when he's in Jerusalem, he turns at one point, but then he turns back, and there's an obviously a moment there where they went on and they like reversed the shot and then used it in the movie, as well as possibly them reversing the shot where both Robin and Azim were to get shot off of this catapult to try to get across to make it to get to where Sheriff of Nottingham is being held with Maid Marion. So we go on, and so the bishop is trying to marry off both Sheriff of Nottingham and Maid Marion, and we have the bishop going on and on and on and on. So we have Sheriff of Nottingham who is trying to not only get married, but then trying to seduce, of course, Maid Marian at the same time. So we go on and have Mortania that is kind of locking these doors, trying to make sure that Robin and Azim won't make it through. So we consistently have it to where like Azim and Robin are trying to use this statue that of course was of Sheriff of Nottingham to bash their way through this door, but it seems that eventually the statue breaks, like the head of it breaks, and so they're like, ah, crap. So Azim is telling Robin to come up with some other way to get into that room, and Azim will keep going through this door. So because of the consistent banging, like there's no way for Sheriff of Nottingham to concentrate on seducing Maid Marian. So Sheriff of Nottingham is taking Mortania to eventually just deal with this problem. So Mortania goes on and eventually finds Azim and stabs into his leg with a spear, and so Mortania is to look at Azim, and she's like, "Oh my God, you're the painted man that I feared for so long." So we then go on and have Azim who takes his spear and eventually is to stab into Mortania, but eventually she does not die right away. Eventually they have to come up with some other way for Azim to fling a sword to stab into this woman to possibly kill her off. So we go on and we have Robin who is to kind of use this kind of like slingshot mechanism to eventually make his way into this room with this kind of banner that he kind of swings into the room. So Robin is to make it into this wedding a little bit too late, and Sheriff of Nottingham is telling Robin, it's like, "Well, you're too late, Robin Hood, we're married." And so Robin's like, "Well, I know a way of getting this marriage annulled." Stab. So come to find out, Sheriff of Nottingham is to have Lord Locksley's sword, and he's teasing Robin with it, and Robin is going on and saying like, "Well, like I've learned not to fear my father's sword." So we have Robin, we have going and sorting it up. We have it at points where, of course, Sheriff of Nottingham is to go on and like slice into this piece of wood, having his sword getting caught in here. There are certain points when eventually Robin is to lose his sword, or his sword is to break, and Robin is to just to fling the sword at the sheriff. So now with Robin not having a sword, we go on and we have it to where Sheriff of Nottingham is looking back at Maid Marian to be like, hey, get ready for like Robin to get killed here. And we have it to where Robin is to have this dagger stabbing into, of course, Sheriff of Nottingham. And then he, before he dies, is to take this dagger and is to pull it from his body and is to look at other just like, what? Like, this was the dagger I gave to you, Maid Marian, and how is it that he has it? And so then Sheriff of Nottingham, of course, is to die, and we finally have it to, of course, where Mortania is to be rushing in there trying to kill Robin Hood, and Azim ends up flinging this sword and ends up killing Mortania. And so now we can go on and have Azim tell Robin Hood that it's like, well, hey, like, I saved your life once, now we're finally even, so I can go on and do whatever the heck I want now. If I want to go back home, I'll go back home. But Azim is to mention that he doesn't have any family. At one point, he is to also have mentioned this story about that there are women so beautiful that they will possess people to do all kinds of things. And so Robin is to ask Azim, it's like, well, hey, is that the reason why? Is that the reason why you went to prison because of a woman? And so Azim doesn't go on and tell the full story, but Robin is to immediately know. It's like, yeah, you went to prison for a woman. So we go on shortly thereafter this and have Robin and Maid Marian get married. So we end up having it to where the friar is to have a moment where it's like everybody, if anybody has an objection, say it now or forever hold your peace. And we have King Richard, who is of course Sean Connery, that makes his way to this wedding, and he's like, well, like, I want to be the person to give this woman away because she's my cousin. And so, like, we have King Richard that is thanking Robin Hood for eventually, kind of saving this kingdom so that way King Richard will have a kingdom to come back to. And so we go on and have the marriage being done by the friar, and because of course the friar ends up going on and killing the bishop, as the bishop is trying to scramble for all of his gold and all of his riches. And so the friar is coming in and like, hey man, like, I'll help you pack. And so the friar is to go on and give the bishop all of these this silver and all these like gold pieces. And he's like, well, yeah, you're gonna need all of this silver when you go to hell. So the friar is to push the bishop out of this window, and then he falls to his death, and have a number of people all scrambling to steal from this bishop. So we go on and have Robin and Marion get married, and eventually that's kind of the send off of this movie, and that's how the movie just ends. So with that said, I think I'm going to try to get out here, because hopefully to try to get this review out there quickly, but to also realize how long I've been talking, and possibly there's a number of things that I probably forgot about within this movie, but I want to kind of to get to the like certain points, and I wanted to just try to get through this quickly. So my apologies if there's a billion things that I probably forgot about, or if there might have been at some point, especially during the whole uh, like Sheriff of Nottingham's cousin thing, where I went on and like I talked about his death before it actually happened. That was a mistake. Um, but I just wanted to rattle off a scene anyways, and eventually just say like, well, but we still have this character alive in this movie. That eventually he'll die later, but still. So mistakes end up getting made, but I also just kind of wanted to quickly get this all out of the way. So I think it's about time to just get out of here. Thank you for watching this review. I really do appreciate it. I get that a lot of these aren't exactly the most popular movies ever of current time of whatever. But when really looking at them, I'm like, you know what? Like these are still good films. Like these are still eventually someone will find them and be interested in them and whatever eventually anyways. So it's only a matter of time at some point that someone will be eventually interested in a film like this. So that's it. I'm going to get out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Bye, everybody.